All right, here goes. I'm gonna say this out loud. I witnessed an alien invasion the other day. Proof! Actual specimens. What else can make that sound? They come in many sizes, and they come in peace too. Super Chewer toys are made of indestructible alien space material. You know, you could put peanut butter or yogurt right in the center. Your dog would enjoy it. It's dishwasher safe. This is really ergonomic so your dog can get a grip while they lick the peanut butter out. This is space food, but it's also like a level 1 puzzle, maybe a level 2 puzzle for Veronica. Look at this little fringy bit. That's so shakeable. It's that attention to detail. This is superior technology. This makes me happy just as a dog person. Look at how you have the elastic here to play tug with. You have a squeaker with dense material surrounding it, so a dog has to really chomp to get the squeak. Both boxes come with lots of high quality treats and dog chews. If you're a Bark subscriber, tell me if your dog likes the treats. And if you're not, go to barkbox.com/dogtraining or superchewer.com/dogtraining and get a free extra month when you sign up. Over our last several videos, I've attempted to make the case that there is a legitimate crisis in the dog training industry right now. And by that, I mean that many dog trainers are advising that people use scientifically problematic methods. Now look, we have frequently touched on how a lot of this has to do with the culture surrounding how we teach dogs, and it may have more to do with that than it does the scientific soundness of the methods. At least here in America, the field of dog training is completely unregulated. And with that, it's a given that at least some percentage of those people are going to be using methods that are outdated. Bree and I were doing a thought experiment recently, trying to project the future of dog training, and we realized that okay, well, we have a past to look at. We ended up down a rabbit hole of 400 years of animal and dog-related legislation. I promise this is gonna be way more interesting than you might think it is. We've selected 5 interesting and controversial events in history that all influence dogs' rights today, and we're also gonna talk about why and how people resisted those changes every step of the way. My hope is that we can put this in context with present day and see if we can make some sense of where all of this is going. Let's start with the 1600s and René Descartes. He was a famous philosopher, scientist, and mathematician. He invented analytical geometry and the concept of skepticism in the scientific method. He did a lot of great things, but like all of us, he was also wrong about some things, including the idea that animals were just machines without emotions and feelings. Descartes famously thought that animals were simply an assembly of pieces, like a watch or a clock. This belief permeated in society. It's common for people to this day to believe some variation of this. But by the mid-1700s, new ideas concerning dogs were starting to emerge. In the 1750s, there was a Swiss philosopher named Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He argued that we are bound to do no harm to our fellow creatures, not because they're rational, but because they're sentient. Sentient just means they're able to feel feelings. And just a few decades later, 1780s, that's where we're at now, there was a philosopher named Jeremy Bentham. He was advocating for the separation of church and state, freedom of expression, equal rights for women, and the right to divorce, the decriminalizing of homosexual acts, and the rights of dogs. He said the question is not can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? I think virtually every single one of us watching would agree with all of that, right? But in his time, there were a lot of people that disagreed with these basic concepts. So now we're only 200 years ago, and we start to see the rise of animal protection organizations like the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, SPCA. The first SPCA helped pass legislation that regulated the carriage horse business. At the time, these horses were forced to work in all kinds of weather, year-round, all without sufficient rest. It was really common practice to beat their horses if they weren't able to work because they were just trying to make as much money as possible, and horses were just viewed as property. After the success with the carriage business, they started to expand to include the rights of dogs and other animals. Horses and dogs. It's always been horses and dogs. So the SPCA forms in order to improve the treatment of animals, but they still face resistance from carriage drivers and others who believe that these animals were just property. I think it's interesting too how dogs and horses and lots of animals have had to ride this line of are you property or do you have rights? Because even today, like, they have rights, but they're still property. Yeah, it's gray, exactly. So around 50 years later, one of the most controversial issues of the day was vivisection. That is the dissection of living animals. And it was a dog who would play a major part in bringing this practice into the public eye. Physiologists at the time were often criticized for inhumane medical practices on animals. And that included dissecting them without anesthesia, often in front of audiences. Audiences of medical students, right? In 1875, the British government recommended reforms, including a total ban on experiments like this with dogs. Apparently, there was a lot of resistance from the medical community at the time. And let's remember, we are a product of our time. These people were just doing their jobs and doing what they thought was best. These doctors and scientists genuinely believed that they were helping humanity with these experiments. And many of them were very important experiments. And also remember, during this time, dogs were not considered complex creatures who deserved rights. So a huge portion of the population didn't really see a problem with these inhumane experiments being performed. Because remember, they didn't feel that dogs were capable of complex feelings anyway, at least a lot of people. So this clash between animal rights activists and members of the medical community really came to a head between 1903 and 1910. Essentially, the vivisection of a small, brown, terrier-like dog went viral. And it incited large-scale protests and riots in the streets of London. It started when two women infiltrated a lecture at the University of London, and they witnessed these experiments on the dog firsthand. When they told people what they saw, widespread outrage across London. So in 1906, they erect this bronze statue of the dog. The plaque on the statue listed statistics of vivisections, and there was a quote that it ended with, "Men and women of England, how long shall these things be?" And let me give you an example of how people resisted this change. This plaque outraged medical students in England. It was so frequently vandalized that they had to install a 24-hour police guard to protect it from what they called anti-doggers. This issue of dog welfare gets tangled up with the major issue of women's rights. In 1907, you've got hundreds of medical students marching through the streets of Trafalgar Square. They're waving effigies of the brown dog on sticks. You've got dog rights activists, women's rights activists, these medical students, 300 police officers, and it became known as the Brown Dog Riots. It was an all-out battle. It's a really interesting moment in history because of all of the nuance. 4 years after the dog statue went up, in 1910, they secretly, the local officials, took down the statue in the middle of the night because they were so tired of the controversy. So this went on for years and years, but a replacement statue was reinstalled in 1985. Way to make it right. In the 1930s, big things were happening in the TV and film industry. Have you ever heard the phrase, "no animals were harmed in the making of this film"? At the time, there were significant animal abuses on movie and TV sets, like tripping horses with wires to make them fall, or deliberately injuring or even killing some animals for scenes. When the "no animals were harmed" disclaimer was introduced in the 30s, there was wide resistance from producers and trainers, and their arguments were that it would increase their costs, and that it would limit their artistic and creative freedom. But the public perception was changing, and moviegoers started to boycott films where animals were known to be harmed. In reality, though, our interpretation of the phrase "no animals were harmed" has changed considerably since the 1930s. Back then, if an animal were injured or killed between takes, or if they were hurt in transport to a set, for example, a film could still easily receive the "no animals were harmed" stamp. Essentially, what it meant back then originally was that no animals were intentionally hurt or injured for the camera. But look how far we've come as a culture when you think about things like this. Today we have much higher expectations as to how animals should be treated throughout the entire process of filming. These days there's significant outcry if an animal is harmed on set. Even today there are still a lot of controversial things that do happen when making movies, even on the sets of films that ultimately receive the "no animals were harmed" stamp. So next, between 1965 and 1979, something really significant happened. This is my favorite part of this whole video. I know. This is great. Yeah, maybe we should just make this part its own video. The 5 freedoms of animal welfare were developed in the UK. They're a simple checklist of needs to make sure that an animal has a high quality of life. What are these 5 magical, fundamental aspects of animal welfare? Tell me if you agree with all of these, by the way. Number 1, freedom from hunger and thirst. I think that one speaks for itself. Number 2, freedom from discomfort by providing an appropriate environment, including shelter and a comfortable resting area. So that's like no chained up dogs outside. Number 3, freedom from pain, injury, or disease. Number 4, freedom to express most normal behavior. And number 5, freedom from fear and distress by ensuring conditions and treatment which avoid mental suffering. I think it should be a given that dog trainers are bound by this very common sense criteria. We are obligated to make sure these fundamental needs are met when we have dogs in our custody. So let's look at how we can use these 5 guidelines in terms of training our own dogs. I'd like to zoom in on number 3, 4, and 5. So let's look at number 3, freedom from pain, injury, or disease. We can make a reasonable case that at the very least, choke prong and electric collars are walking right up to that line of causing pain. Remember, they appear to work because they cause discomfort, and that's when used as directed. Basically what I'm saying is, even if it is only discomfort and it isn't painful, it's unnecessarily approaching pain, and we should be going the other direction. And while I know that proponents of using these tools will say the ends justify the means, this is still highly problematic given what we know and the alternatives available. Number 4, the freedom to express normal behavior. Let's talk about this. This is really about a dog's right to be a dog. But when we use punishment to completely suppress behaviors that come naturally to dogs, things like barking, jumping, chewing, having tons of extra energy to burn, we're potentially harming our dog's quality of life unnecessarily. That doesn't mean we let them do what they want, but it's important to let dogs be able to practice those behaviors in ways that we find acceptable too. And in all honesty, we see this very often in the dog training industry, the use of these punishing tools in order to suppress behaviors like this. And number 5, freedom from fear and distress. I think this is one of the more obvious ones because we know that aversive methods with all animals, including dogs, including people, and every other animal, have been shown to potentially contribute to stress and fear. At the very least, aversive training methods come very close to crossing the line of 3 of these 5. And objectively, sometimes they definitely do. I get it. I know a lot of you are wondering, why are you harping on this so much, Zach? I hear you. But remember, right now, even though many dog trainers are very divided on this issue, there is a scientific consensus that aversives are not necessary as part of a dog training or behavior modification plan. In addition to that, they're potentially detrimental to a dog's welfare and should not be used in training. In spite of the divide in dog training, none of us can deny the fact that there's been so much progress in the treatment of dogs. Today, at least 35 countries recognize the sentience of animals. Remember, that's the ability to feel and experience emotions. Do you guys think dogs have sentience? Tell me that would be a good poll question. Tell me in the comments though. Yeah. Do dogs have sentience in your view? That would be eye-opening. So what are things looking like present day? There are many issues that are still being debated around the world in relation to dogs. For example, ear and tail cropping, greyhound racing, dog chaining, that's just chaining dogs up, I guess, in certain situations outside without shelter. Some aspects of dog breeding are quite controversial. And of course, aversive dog training methods, which is the reason I'm chiming in on this issue. What do you guys think dog training is going to look like in 100 years, in 400 years? We should all acknowledge that progress is not guaranteed. I mean, people have gone up and down on these issues lots of times throughout the eons. If history is an indicator, things are not likely to stay as they are. But what will they be like? What do you think the nearest and biggest change is that's on the horizon in dog training? Do you think we're likely to see a lot of change, or do you think we've got it figured out and where we are is where we should stay? We've come a long way in the understanding of dogs and their place in our society, but we still face the challenge of aligning our cultural beliefs and our ethics with our scientific understanding of how we should treat dogs, at least in dog training. Lots to think about. Get a free BarkBox or Super Chewer box when you subscribe via my special links. I'll have them in the description. barkbox.com/dogtraining. Get a copy of both of my books, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, and subscribe to my channel for tons of free and hopefully interesting dog training content. See you in the next video.